the handouts for today. And our topic, I hope it is encouraging to you. It's not the happiest topic, but the topic is abortion, and I hope we can get biblical and thoughtful about it. Spicy, yeah, I did say spicy before. So that's the topic we'll get into, and again, I hope it helps us to think more deeply about who we are as people made in God's image, and what are some of the things that we ought to be aware of with regard to being image bearers. What life is and its purpose before God. So again, I really hope that it's encouraging. So let's have someone pray. Let me grab these new steps. Whoa, they look incredible, but they're half done. They're treacherous. So yeah, it's going to look great. But I think Jose Garcia from our Spanish service did this yesterday, and he did quick work because I came in midday and he was gathering materials. So he does good work and vacuumed up all the sawdust too. So, all right. Is there somebody who'd like to pray for us to get started? Bill, thanks. I think there we go, that's all.
Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for bringing us here today, for calling us. Lord, give us ears to hear and understanding heart what the Spirit is telling us. Use Pastor Sanjay to convey your word, your truth, your message to us, Father. Keep us humble, Lord, and thank you so much, Father, for the precious blood of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, well, this was a couple weeks ago, and in our main service, I'll catch you up on why I was absent last Sunday, but we didn't have Sunday school. So this is going back a couple weeks. We did have a conversation on abortion, and we looked at what was the classical argument for abortion going back to the 1970s. I just saw Betty. She was here a couple weeks ago. She gave a testimony. She was in high school at the time when 1973, when abortion was legalized, and she remembers the debates as they were happening at that time and the discussions they were having at school. And I wanted to look back at the classical argument, and just to get our philosophical thinking aligned with the arguments that they made, because people today, even though they maybe didn't read those classical arguments, is just the way that we commonly think. So Judith Jarvis Thompson's famous violinist argument was that, imagine you find yourself and you wake up one morning in a hospital room. You don't remember what happened. Attached, let's say your kidneys are being used for dialysis. You're attached to some ailing, famous violinist. Who did this to you? She said, maybe the Society of Music Lovers did this to you. Kind of a funny story here. Well, now how should we think about that? She says, would it be wrong for you to detach? Suppose the doctors say, this is a terrible thing that's happened to you. We would not have done this to you. I know that you didn't consent to being attached to this violinist, but somebody has done this to you. And if we detach him, we just want you to know, he will die. If you remain attached to him for 9 months, well, then he'll live, and we'll detach him, and then he'll go on with his life. But we want that to be your decision. And of course, you can see here, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, the analogy to rape. She wants to make a case, and this would be again in 1971, that in such cases, it has to be morally permissible to abort. That's the appeal that she's making. If you say, well, yeah, it would be very nice of me to remain attached to the violinist for 9 months, I would be showing a lot. It would be very, particularly Christ-like. It would be such an odd situation, and it would be particularly generous is the word I was looking for, to do that. But if someone were to say, I'm so sorry, I don't wish him any ill, but I cannot be attached to him for 9 months. I cannot bear this responsibility. And we say, oh, well, the consequence is that he'll die. That's true. I'm not killing him. I'm not killing him. His ailment is killing him. And in such a situation, would we say to somebody, well, you're cruel for not submitting to this? Thompson says, well, no, of course not. Of course, we wouldn't think that. So that's her first argument. That's a fairly challenging one. But again, it would only be, not in general elective abortion, but that would just be clearly in cases of rape. Then she moves on to another really interesting thought experiment, and this one's even weirder. If you can imagine, excuse me, getting even weirder here. But she just says this very quickly, just kind of sets the stage. Imagine we live in a world where people are born from seeds that float through the air, and they implant in the ground, and then a person grows up out of that seed that implants. It's such a strange scenario. And she says, imagine that someone has a home and opens her window to let the breeze in. But she's got a screen on the window, but the screen is defective. She doesn't realize it, but there's a tear or something in the window, and a seed floats through the defective screen and implants in the carpet. And then this thing begins to grow, and you get a person plant. This is really what she says. Would it be wrong to vacuum? Would it be evil to uproot the person plant? And of course, now you're already making out, okay, what she has in mind here in this next scenario is unwanted pregnancy in cases of failed contraception. She took precautions to keep a person seed from floating through the window by having a proper screen installed, but let's say the screen was defective. It wasn't her fault. She didn't do anything wrong there, and it wasn't installed properly, and one of these person seeds gets through. And so now she wants to say, think about those scenarios. Would it be then wrong to uproot the person plant from your home? No one would say, well, it was your choice to open the window. Yeah, but I took precautions so that something like this wouldn't happen. So these are the scenarios that she gives. And on your second page, if you're interested, I've written all of that, where I've described all of those scenarios. You can find those essays if you're really inclined to read them. But on the second side, there's a QR code. You can see that, and where I also respond to it. So anyway, we're doing a little philosophy here. This is Sunday school. We ought to be doing more Bible. We'll get to that in just a second, but I just want to ask your thoughts. What do you think about that? About these two kind of strange scenarios in the case that she makes. Do you find it, well, there's some reason there, there's some logic. Do you find a logic problem? Gary, you said it's an illogical fallacy. What do you have in mind? Fantasy. What do you have in mind? She might ask, Thompson might ask, what are wrong with my thought experiments exactly? Do you disagree? Let the person plant grow. Yeah. Here. Yeah, I don't think Thompson. So Joe said it's God's will, and we have to accept God's will on these things. And I think you and I will agree to that. I understand that not everyone's going to agree to that. I understand they're not in that place, and it's hard for me to say, you're just being irrational when you don't see things the way I do. I realize that you're in a different place, and you're not going to necessarily see God's will in these things. The way that she sets up these scenarios, it seems right to me that in the first scenario, if someone were to say, look, I don't want to be attached to this person for 9 months, they do have the prerogative to detach. That seems right to me. And in the second case, it does seem right to me that you have the prerogative to vacuum. So what would be the dish analogy? She wants to make the case that even if the fetus in the womb is a person, and that's the main question, the fetus in the womb, is that a person or not? You and I are persons, and we have different stages of life, right? We were babies, toddlers, preteens, teens, young adults, elderly. We go through all the stages of life. Is fetus, prior to birth, another one of those stages of life before baby? Well, the answer is yes. The biblical answer is yes, and we want to get to that. But of course, the pro-abortion answer is, well, no. No, anything prior to birth is not yet a person. And I'll explain as we look at Marianne Warren why that's a pretty outlandish claim. They don't realize how outlandish that claim is. They just kind of take it to be obvious. It's not obvious at all. So Thompson is doing something really interesting. She's saying, okay, you can have it. Fetuses are persons. All you pro-life people, I'll give you that. But it's still the case that it can be morally permissible to abort anyway, even if the fetus is a person. So if you say to Thompson, you can't abort because the fetus in the womb is a person, she'll say, I admit that, just like I admit the violinist is a person, just like I admit that the person plant is a person. That doesn't mean you can't abort. And that's her argument. Yeah, Betty?
If we go to Genesis 1 and we start reading this, God spoke and things happened. They were live a moment he spoke. So when a sperm meets with the egg, it's fertile. It's life. Granted, it would not. I've had 3 miscarriages.
Yeah.
And the moment the seed and the sperm connected, I had a child growing in me. It was life.
Yeah.
In my junior and senior year, this is when this was the main topic. Yeah. This was the thing that was talked about. This was the thing, Roe v. Wade, that came to light. And I so much disagreed then, but I had to be put on a kind of like in speech class, you had a for and against. And I happened to be put on the against, which was so very hard.
I can imagine.
That I got up there and said, I can't do this. Yeah. I brought my Bible to class. I opened my Bible to Genesis 1, and I read. I said, now you tell me, when God spoke, there was life. Yeah. We became a world. We became. Yeah. Yes, it took days. He did stuff, but the things that he did, the trees, the flowers, the animals, the moment he spoke, they had breath in their lungs. They were real.
Thank you. Yeah. I want to get to that question. And the question that we'll pick up next is not when life begins, but when personhood begins, and whether or not they're not the same thing. The preamble to Roe v. Wade, if you've ever read that famous decision, is actually unclear. It's surprisingly unclear. When they should have been completely clear about things, they weren't. And you are totally right. At the moment of conception, I can't think of a better time for when you have a human being than at the moment of conception. There's no developmental stage after that at which we go, well, now we have a person. Sometimes people say brain activity or heartbeat. I don't think that's going to do it, because somebody with an artificial heart doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't mean they cease to be a person. Somebody in a coma without brain activity does not cease to be a person. Brain activity and heartbeats aren't necessarily the criteria for personhood. So we'll get to that. But I just want to emphasize what you're saying is true, but it wouldn't affect Thompson. Thompson's argument is not affected by that, because what she's saying is, Betty, I agree with you. Can you imagine this pro-abortionist saying, I agree with you. Life begins at conception. In fact, I'm willing to maybe agree with you that I believe in Genesis 1. I don't think Thompson did, but she says, I believe in Genesis 1. It's still okay to abort in these situations. It's still okay to abort. Because even if the thing in the womb, the fetus, is a baby, is a human person, if you were connected to the violinist or the person plant were growing in your living room, disconnecting or uprooting the person plant is something that you can do. And so in certain situations, we can both believe that the fetus is a person with full personal rights and all of that, and yet abortion is permissible. This might be why you get some pro-abortion views even within the church. This seems to be a persuasive argument or persuasive reasoning for some people. And here's my response. Again, I'll get to you in a second. Yeah, my response is that we often speak of the right to life, which is true. You have a right to life. If somebody wants to harm you or batter you, we will defend you. The police will defend you. You're a human being. You have a right to life. This podium doesn't have a right to exist. If I destroy the podium because I don't like it, now let's say it's my podium. I'm not destroying somebody else's property, because then I'd be liable to. But if it's my podium and I destroy it, nobody would say, that podium, how dare you do that to that podium? That podium had a right to exist. No, it doesn't. This podium exists or doesn't exist, and I can determine that, and I can use and abuse this podium all I want. Okay? But I can't use and abuse any of you all I want. There's a difference between intrinsic value. You have value in and of yourself no matter what you do for anyone else. This podium doesn't have intrinsic value. This podium has instrumental value. It's good insofar as it's useful to us. If we don't find it useful or don't want it, we can chuck it in the bin. But not so for you. So persons have intrinsic value, right? Well, my response is this. Yes, everyone has a right to life. But to Thompson's point, I think we also need to say this. The fetus in the womb not only has a right to life, but has a right to gestate. The fetus has a right to gestate. Here's the difference. The person seed who floated through the window and implanted in the guy's carpet and that began to grow into a person plant, you know, that second weird thought experiment she had, that's not the proper place for that person seed. His living room and his carpet was not designed for the gestation of the person plant. But the human womb is designed for the gestation of human embryos and human fetuses. A fetus in his or her mother's womb is in the place that he or she is supposed to be. We might say to a person plant growing in our carpet, you're not supposed to be here. I had my screens on my window. How did you float through the window? This isn't your proper place. I'm vacuuming. You cannot say that to the fetus in the womb. The fetus in the womb, if he or she could respond to us, would say, this is the place where I belong. This is my womb. This is my womb. And we have a real competition here because, of course, the main slogan of the pro-abortion position is my body, my choice. This challenges that. It is your body. You have bodily autonomy. Absolutely. Do we want women's health rights? Absolutely. But the womb is not exclusively your body. When an embryo or fetus is there, that is the embryo or fetus's proper place. And if Thompson is going to admit that the fetus is a person, then I think it's a very short step to show that the fetus has a right to gestate. Nature put the fetus there, not some accident, not some strange scheme of the Society for Music Lovers who connected you to the violinist. It's not some evil scheme. It's not some odd scenario. It's the proper place. So my body, my choice is not exclusively true. It is largely true. Let's admit that, because we don't want women feeling as if they're somehow being bullied or cornered, you know, or told, how to use their bodies in ways that we have freedom to use our bodies. Like, we have all sorts of freedoms that we can do with our bodies. For example, you're free to go to the gym and lift heavy weights. And somebody might say, well, you know, I don't like that. I don't want you to do that. I want you to do something else. Well, they don't have the right to tell you that. So that's a clear place where you have bodily autonomy. But it's not total or exclusive. We don't have exclusive and overriding bodily autonomy. And the womb, again, once a woman is pregnant, is not exclusively her own. So I think, speaking of the right to gestate, is something that we need to emphasize. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, since she understands that life begins at conception, I don't understand. Then she has to say, well, I just want to disrespect that. You see what I'm saying? Because that's just you want to disrespect that and say that it doesn't need to be there if you don't want it there. And women, as women, I can't go outside right now and take all my clothes off and walk down the street.
Yeah, men
But
too.
it is my body. You
Right.
know what I'm just saying from the sake of women. It's my body. Why can't I do that? And why do you accept that? But
Yeah.
you don't accept that you can't disrespect life.
Yeah.
You can't. And if some people try to say it's not life, well, if it's not life, skip it.
Yeah.
And start life wherever it starts. You know what? It doesn't. You almost can't intellectualize with these people because they're flawed in the way that they think.
Well, I want to give Thompson her credit. I think she makes a persuasive argument. So the argument, I think you weren't here, but it's a weird one. But she said, imagine that you find yourself and you woke up and you were accosted by somebody. You didn't do this, and you woke up attached to an ailing violinist. The Society of Music Lovers abducted you and connected you, and you're providing, your kidneys are being used by him for dialysis for 9 months. Is it wrong to detach? That's the weird argument that she gives. I think that
reminds me of my high school students when I taught high school. It was always if. That is to me, I wouldn't be able to talk.
Well, I think it's actually, I actually appreciate her making that argument because I think it helps us think better about it.
I don't appreciate it because it's too far-fetched.
It is.
I don't want my mind to be taken to a far-fetched
Yeah.
situation that has never had any grounds, just doesn't exist. I can't go there with that
Let me
person,
tell
but
you, I'll just reiterate what her argument does for us and how it helps us. I think it really helps us. In that scenario, I would say it's permissible to detach. I would say, Dr. Thompson, you're right. Yeah, I would say you're right. And then I would have to say to her, here's the difference. The violinist was attached to you through some nefarious scheme. But a fetus in a woman's womb is not there by some nefarious scheme. A fetus is in his or her natural place. The womb belongs to the fetus. And to simply say, well, my body, my choice is not, in the violinist case, I think you can say my body, my choice. In the fetus case, you can't say that. It is largely true, my body, my choice, but a fetus has a right to gestate. That is the fetus's natural place. So I think we need to emphasize that. That's what she's going for. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's the argument that she's trying to make. So that's Thompson. It's an interesting one. It can be a little frustrating. That's what she does. And then right before Roe v. Wade, Marianne Warren, you see a bullet point there. She came along right immediately before. So this would have been 1973. And she was a leading philosopher too, just like Thompson. And she said, I appreciate Dr. Thompson's argument, but it's not going to work for us. I don't think we want to be in the business of admitting that the thing in the womb is a person. I think we pro-choice, they weren't using that language pro-choice yet. They used to call themselves pro-abortion. So the pro-abortion side, we're going to lose the argument if we admit that fetuses are persons. So Marianne Warren really pushed a new approach. Let's deny that fetuses are persons. Let's not even play that game at all. And so she said she's appreciative, but she just doesn't like Thompson's argument. So the pro-abortion argument has gone in that direction. And this is what she says. She says this. She says, how do we know that we have a person? When you have a person, imagine, okay, let me give you a weird scenario. I know we don't like far-fetched scenarios, but everybody likes Chronicles of Narnia, I hope. Okay, that's a pretty far-fetched scenario. Imagine you push through the wardrobe and you go into this wintry land and you're exploring around for a while and you're cold and you're hungry and you see a beaver and you say, you know what I can do? I can butcher this beaver, I can cook its meat and eat, and I can turn its fur into a hat and I'll be warm. So that's my plan. And you go to butcher the beaver and the beaver says, oh, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. My name is Mr. Beaver. And you're a traveler, and I just want to show good hospitality. Welcome to Narnia. If you come to my house, Mrs. Beaver, she has a wonderful stew, and we can sit and eat, and so please don't hurt me. Well, if you encountered Mr. Beaver, and then at that point you go through with your plan to butcher him and roast his meat and turn him into a hat, you would be a murderer. Mr. Beaver is a person, and how do we know that? Well, because we encounter these different attributes. You know you have a person when you have consciousness. You and I are conscious beings. But let's say, I don't know, let's just pick an animal like a horse. A horse is also conscious. Horses are not unconscious, right? They're conscious beings. And so that's not all you need to have for personhood. You have to have consciousness. You have to have rationality. So you have to be able to reason to some degree. Now, how much rationality do you have to have? She doesn't exactly say. Some people have more, some people have less. One of the interesting things about human rationality is that we can think, for sure, but we can also think about our thoughts, which other animals can't do. So rationality, you need to have communicability, the ability to communicate. Okay, how much communicability do you have to have? Do you have to be Shakespeare? None of us are that good at communication. You don't have to be Shakespeare per se, but you have to be able to communicate in some way. And you have to have some degree of free will, free action. And she says a fifth one, I'm forgetting, but if you look at what I wrote up on her, you'll see I outline all five. So if you have those things, and when you encounter Mr. Beaver, you see consciousness, and you see rationality. He's reasoning with you, trying to bargain with you. Please don't hurt me. Come to my house and we'll have a wonderful stew. He's clearly communicating with you. He shows free will. So that's how you know what a person is. And she just says this: when we look at embryos under a microscope, do you detect consciousness, rationality, communicability, free will? You don't detect any of those things, do you? So we have no reason to think that embryos are persons. So she thinks that personhood kind of evolves in stages, and at some mysterious point, we don't say exactly where, something goes from being a genetic person to being a genetic human to being a moral human. Genetic human means, yeah, you've got human genetics, and the embryo, the fetus, is genetically independent from his or her mother, of course. A fetus has his or her own DNA, so genetically independent, but we might say a human thing, not a human person. So you can be a human thing without being a human person. At some point, the human thing becomes a human person. If my pinky were severed and there it is on the ground, that would be horrific, but that would be a human thing. Somebody would say, oh, what is that? Oh my goodness, it's a human thing. It's a piece of a person, but it wouldn't be a person, right? So there can be human things that aren't human persons. That's her point. So the fetus can be a human thing without being a human person. That's her argument. That is the standard pro-abortion thinking now. The standard thinking is that at some point, a human thing becomes a human person, and we never say exactly when it is. Western laws, US laws, were largely based on birth as being the moment when a human thing becomes a human person. And this is where the Roe v. Wade decision is very unclear. If you read the preamble to Roe v. Wade, they say, the majority opinion says, we, the judiciary, cannot determine when life begins if doctors and philosophers and theologians don't know when life begins. We can't decide. We're just judges. They have to decide. Well, that's very unclear. There's really no debate on when life begins. If you're talking to anybody that's... I think they use the wrong word. I mean, they're very smart, but I think they use the wrong word. I think this is a big confusion. They should have said, we don't know when personhood begins. There's no question, like what Betty was saying, when sperm meets egg and the embryo is formed, ask any doctor. They say, well, there we have life. If you were to find that on Mars, we would, it'd be front page news, life has been found. Human embryos are human life. And Marianne Warren, pro-abortion people who understand the distinction, they understand that. What they wanted to say is, we don't know when personhood begins. So when does personhood begin? And Marianne Warren, in her argument, she never fully answers that. She just says it develops through stages. So we've got a couple criteria. We can say it begins at conception. That's when personhood begins. We could say it begins at viability. That means the fetus can live outside of the womb without medical life support, or it begins at birth, or perhaps even after birth. You really don't have a person until maybe 2 years old. You only have a human thing. And it's perfectly permissible to destroy human things. It's not permissible to destroy human persons. So let's think about her criteria real quick. What do you think about, well, we already said conception. Sperm and egg come together, you've got an embryo, life begins there. Marianne Warren is going to say, I can't communicate with the embryo. There's no reasoning with the embryo. There's apparently no consciousness in the embryo. I don't see a person. So I don't think conception is the right way. Yeah, Bill? And then Arita?
So I recall my mom's reaction back in 1981 when she found out she was going to be a grandma for the first time. So, of course, she's excited. She goes with my sister to the doctor appointment. And I think the name was called a sonogram. So what's a sonogram show? A baby's heartbeat, right? So, it's like, okay, it's not the mother's heartbeat. There's a baby's heartbeat, plain and simple.
Yeah.
That's my argument.
Yeah,
Not
that
checking
is,
the mother's heartbeat.
Yeah.
The baby's heartbeat. There's a person there.
that is so viscerally convincing for so many people. Women, the vast majority of women who find themselves pregnant, and maybe they were a teen that wasn't expecting it, was definitely hoping against it, but her heart is immediately converted. This is my child. The vast majority of women have that experience. And so when we encounter people and when a mother encounters her child in her womb, it's a very intimate knowledge that this is my child.
Why do we validate her word person? Because she had to come up with that, because you cannot say where life began. She knew she had to deal with that. So why are we validating her changing anything? And for me to have a conversation with her, I would be like, you want to skip the truth, which is the beginning of life, and now you want to come up with a word, and you want to change, you want to say life, but you can't even, definitely you can't even define when a person is a person, when I can define when life began. So end of conversation. There's nothing else to debate.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
So if I was talking to her, that's what I would tell her. I said, so I'm not going to validate what you're saying.
Yeah. Her intentional ambiguity about it is very suspicious. Why are you being so ambiguous about this? Why do you want to pretend as if we don't know when we have a person? That's suspicious. And I totally agree with you. Distinguishing between human things and human persons is very dangerous.
The finger is a thing, but when life begins, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Because everything there to make a person is there.
Right.
If I lose my finger, I'm fine. I'm still a person. You see what I'm saying? So you can't call the beginning of life a thing.
Yeah.
Because everything that is in that beginning is there for whatever stage you want to call them. If you want to call them an embryo, if you want to call them a fetus, if you want to call them a person, whatever you want to call them, everything is there.
Yeah.
So therefore, it is not a thing. It is the beginning of life, and you do not disrespect that beginning because you disrespect yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You disrespect yourself.
Yeah, we're playing a really dangerous game by making that distinction. I just want to point out that's the vast majority of pro-abortion people think this way. We're just figuring out how they think. So that would count if I don't know if how good the statistics are. I guess that's 50% of the country that we live in thinks in this way. We just kind of want to unearth the roots of where this thinking came from.
Yeah, the criteria is very, very dangerous because you fall into the Hitler's category. He just declares people non-people, whether they're Jews or whether they're a little bit touched in the head or a lot touched in the head, or they're in some way incapacitated, they're not useful to society. If that's the criteria, then we should have emulated Hitler, not gotten rid of him. And obviously we don't agree with that idea. So I think it doesn't sound so bad when you put it in these pristine kind of terms, but it's an extremely dangerous set of criteria.
Absolutely. This isn't a good argument. This would be called this would be some sort of fallacious argument. So I'm not really making an argument. Let me just point something out. Anyone who has ever wanted to systematically, genocidally abuse someone else distinguishes between human things and human persons. We're persons, but those guys over there aren't really like us, are they? If you want to enslave someone, you have to turn them into a human thing and deny their personhood. If they have personhood equal to you, well, then you have to recognize their intrinsic rights. And so, anyway, that's not an argument against abortion, but I'm just pointing out that distinguishing between human things and human persons is a very dangerous game to play. So what about viability? Well, viability wouldn't be a good criteria for personhood because viability depends on the state of medical technology. A fetus is viable in Manhattan before he or she is viable in, say, I don't know, North Korea. I assume that medical facilities are much better in New York. I don't know. And so your personhood does not depend on the state of medical technology around you, right? So that wouldn't be a good criteria for personhood. Western laws are largely based on birth being the criteria for personhood. And passing through the birth canal is not a magical portal that gives you personhood on the way out. The moment before birth and the moment after birth, the fetus, the baby, hasn't changed in any significant ways. And so to say you can abort the minute before, that would have been the old debate over late-term abortions. The good news is, as far as I understand, there are very few late-term abortions. Most abortions happen, I think, before 22 weeks. But late-term abortions have been, and in many places are legal, not everywhere anymore. But there's no significant difference before and after. So birth is not a good criteria. Birth only determines where you are, your place in the world. People are in different places. Some people are in Chicago, some people are in Detroit, some people are in the womb, some people are outside of the womb. I don't see how that makes you a person or not a person.
We have a case right now. I can't say a case, but in Australia, 4 babies were born at 26 weeks. They were taken cesarean section, but they're alive, they're viable, they're identical. 4 identical babies. I don't know what the sexes are, but I guess the moment I knew I was pregnant, I was elated. I mean, couldn't feel yet the
Yeah.
baby, but I knew it was there.
Yeah.
And I think they all had to have they got to have their head examined.
Yeah. The laws, the way that we practice them can be so contradictory. I don't know if you remember, now this would be going back, I think about 20 years. Remember the case of Lacey Peterson in California? Scott Peterson, and I was in California at the time, this is big national news, but it was local news for us as well. Scott Peterson lost his pregnant wife, Lacey. She apparently was kidnapped, and he blamed some gangs or something outlandish. And later on, her body was found. She had been killed, and she was pregnant with their son, Connor. That was his name, in her womb. Turns out that he did it. Scott Peterson murdered Lacey Peterson, his wife. He had a girlfriend. He didn't want to have a child with her. It's horrific. He played the grieving husband on TV. I remember watching this, and I remember, again, it was local news, people going out and being part of search parties, and it was just so traumatic, and he was the one who did it. California convicted him of double homicide, where abortion is legal. He was convicted of double homicide in California of the murder of both Lacey and Connor. Why was Connor considered a person in California where Lacey could have had him aborted? Yeah, we are not consistent about this. We do not tell the truth about what we really think. Because Connor was wanted by Lacey, and he certainly was, that made him a person. If your mom doesn't want you, that doesn't make you. If your mom disowns you, that doesn't take away your personhood. Right? So let me just give a quick counter-argument, and I hope this is interesting and helpful. Let me give a quick counter-argument to Marianne Warren. I think this is an original argument. I've never read anyone else who said this, but I think this is the way to respond. Okay, she said, if you have those criteria for personhood, then you're a person. Like consciousness, reason, the ability to communicate, and free will. So if you've got those things, and it doesn't seem like embryos do, then you're a person. Okay. Well, you and I have those. What if you fall asleep? Do you lose your personhood? Because you're not conscious, you're unconscious. You're not reasoning. You're not communicating. You're not expressing free will. You're just asleep. Do you lose your personhood when you fall asleep? Can we then butcher you and use you for meat, like an animal? No, of course not. And I think Marianne Warren would admit, no, falling asleep doesn't take away your personhood. It's not about exercising them. It's about having them in you. So we might call them imminent criteria for personhood, meaning like it's right there in you. I can just shake you and say, Norma nods off, and I say, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to ask you a question. And and all of the consciousness and the communication and the rationality and the free will, it all comes back just immediately, just giving her a little shake. She says, oh, sorry, I dozed off for a second. I just needed to talk to you for a second. So it's about it being in you imminently, and you might already see where I'm going, okay? But what if we then say to Marianne Warren, imagine that the person doesn't just momentarily fall asleep, but goes into a coma for, I don't know, 9 months, let's say. So a person goes into a coma for 9 months. They ate some mushrooms they shouldn't have eaten. And we take the person in and we say, is he going to die, doctor? No. He's in a coma. He'll come back. He'll be fine in 9 months. He ate this kind of mushroom, and it just knocked him out. So he's going to come back in 9 months. We might ask Marianne Warren, did he cease to be a person during the course of his coma? And of course, she's going to say no. Now, I used to teach this same scenario at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix. I used to teach it years ago. And Grand Canyon is a Christian school, but you don't have to be a Christian to attend there. And so it's a very mixed audience. And I used to get classes that were kind of like 50-50, Christians and non-Christians. And that's not always a perfect guide to who's pro-life and who's pro-choice, but it kind of falls that way. So I'd get classes that were kind of like 50-50 pro-life and pro-choice. And so I'd ask the pro-choice side, if somebody goes into a coma, do they cease to be a person? And they would say, well, no, of course not. You don't cease to be a person. So then obviously you know what the next question is going to be. If the one in the coma has his personhood for 9 months, why does the fetus in the womb not have his or her personhood? Because they're both going to exemplify the criteria of personhood after 9 months in the same way. We're going to look at the baby and we're going to say, this is baby, a person. We're going to look at the man who came out of his coma, oh, this is a person. At different stages of life, we have two persons. So what's the difference between somebody in the coma and a fetus in the womb? What do you think they said about that? What do you think? So the pro-life people, what was the difference for them? Nobody ever said that, but that's an interesting thing. That being inside the body, the fetus, makes you a non-person. Nobody ever really argued that. Yeah, we'll go on to euthanasia next week. But what's the difference between the personhood of the fetus in the womb? You might say that the fetus in the womb has the natural capacities for personhood. You might say that the person in a coma has embedded capacities for personhood. What's the difference between natural capacities for personhood? Again, consciousness, rationality, communicability, free will. If the person in the coma is going to have all that stuff in 9 months, and the fetus in the womb is going to have all that stuff in 9 months, what's the difference? Okay, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. They would say, here's the difference. The man in the coma was a person before, so he gets to keep his personhood through his coma. But the fetus hasn't yet developed personhood. So once the fetus develops it, let's say after 9 months, then from there on forward, she gets to be a person. It's because the man in the coma was a person before. Now, I don't think that's a very good answer. Okay, now I'm taking a big risk here, you guys, and we're going to break here because this is my first day as our full-time pastor, and I'm going to say something heretical, okay? So be gracious with me. So I asked these pro-abortion people in my class, and I wanted to care about them and teach them well. I didn't want to just, beat up on anyone, but I wanted them to think seriously. And so I asked them this question. Okay, so you're saying that having personhood before the coma is what makes so-and-so a person through his coma. What if we lived past lives? What if the fetus in the womb was Abraham Lincoln in a past life? Would that change your views on abortion? Now, we didn't live past lives. Let me just say that very clearly, okay? So we're appointed to live once and once to die and then face judgment. And so you live one time. Reincarnation is false. But if we're going to have wild arguments here, I would ask the pro-abortion people, what if we live past lives? Would that change your mind? That would be to say that the fetus in the womb was a person before. If you were persuaded that that's at least possible, would you say, wait, hold on. Let me check out whether we live past lives or not before we abort? And they all looked at me like I was crazy. And they said, absolutely not. It wouldn't change our minds. So my response to them is, well, then your argument that the man in the coma has personhood because he's a person before is not really your argument. You actually don't care about that. Because if the fetus was a person before, you said we can still abort, so why can't we just butcher people in comas? Why do we have to treat them like persons? So that's not really their reason. So to Rita's point that she made a long time ago, I've been wandering for a while here. She made a point a long time ago. There's a lot of deceptive talk going on here. There is no good magical point at which we say, we have a person now, other than conception, it seems to me. And
But they are a person in that
who is a person?
mother,
Who's a person? Like an embryo?
embryo, you mother feels the child, her womb. To her, it is a person, whether it's a woman or a man. Because of the way the child moves in her womb during the 9 months, she's already made this a person.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it seems to me that the vast majority of women who become pregnant have an immediate, visceral, intimate knowledge of their child, immediate care for their child. They immediately, in some cases, they didn't want it. They immediately sense their responsibility to nurture the child. Vast majority of women feel that way. They're feeling the right way. Not everyone does, of course. Sometimes their feelings go the wrong way, and you take some fear, some anxiety, some ignorance, and then you manipulate that. I think pro-abortion rhetoric is going to kind of manipulate that. Then she might see it a different way. So I think that to say that a woman's intuitions or feelings can lead us in the right direction is true, and we ought to pay attention to that. Feelings and intuitions, however, ultimately aren't going to really work for us because people can say, well, I have different feelings and different intuitions, so you got to accept how I feel about it, and I feel like I want to abort. In those cases, it's just not going to help us to go with intuitions or something like that. So that's why I want to look at her argument and see, well, when does personhood begin? And she never really says. She leaves it vague. And if we were to press it, I think my weird argument is going to lead us to say, you don't have any criteria for personhood. And again, the Roe v. Wade decision was ambiguous about this, which is just so suspicious. And so I think we don't distinguish between human things and human persons. We don't do that under any circumstances. If you have a human thing, this is a human thing, you have a human person at the same time. At one point, I was an embryo. I was a human embryo, that's a human thing, and also I was a person. Although I didn't have consciousness, I didn't communicate. Consciousness, again, is not required for personhood. Communicability is not required. Some people can communicate like Shakespeare, some can't. Some people are as rational as Aristotle, some aren't, right? Some people are as conscious and sober-minded as your dear grandmother. Some less so, right? And so that's how the vast majority of people think about this. Now, we will come back next time, and I know that we've done all philosophy, which is unfortunate. So next time, we're going to focus on Psalm 139. And this is one of the great psalms concerning David praising God, that he's known God from the womb. And we'll also think of, Luke chapter 1. John the Baptist leaping for joy at hearing Mary's voice. Fetal John was leaping for joy and praising God in the womb. So we'll look at those things. And I also want to look at Exodus 21. This is a big controversial passage concerning miscarriages, or perhaps premature births, and what God's law is concerning that. There's been a lot of debate about that. So again, that little QR code there, if you want to read ahead, I actually wrote all that out. You can see that, okay? So that'll be our plan for next time. Psalm 139, Luke 1 maybe are things that you can look at, and we'll talk about those, okay? All right, amen? All right, shalom.